Morning, Sal. Sal, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you.
For a
Morning.
minute there, I thought everybody had slept in.
No, sorry, on the road.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Yeah.
How you doing?
Okay. So, this allegation of open meeting law violation,
Yeah.
I don't think it affects our business, but I'm going to acknowledge it at the beginning of the meeting because I think we need to proceed with our business pending whatever we do at the special meeting
Right.
where we're going to consider a remedy.
Have we set that yet? Do you know? Are we doing that on
I
Monday?
don't know. I think we were shooting for the 20th, but I haven't heard. I was hoping Kelly would maybe know.
Okay, great. I agree.
Good morning.
Good morning. I had to check. I was like, I don't even know what I look like. I don't know. I did a
You're
speed round of dropping kids at daycare, getting to my
you're
desk for 8 o'clock. So
you're totally recognizable.
I'm recognizable. That's all that matters. That's right.
That's
Thank you. Validating. Uh, yeah, the two kid daycare drop off sometimes works in my favor because I get one of them to make the other one do things. So the 5-year-old, the 2-year-old will do anything the 5-year-old says, and if the 5-year-old really wants to get in to see his friends and toys, the 2-year-old will go.
Yeah, daycare has a drop-off pickup time problem. I
yeah.
mean, 8 to 4 doesn't work.
Well, you know what? I am very, very, very lucky. My husband works for a company that has on-site daycare. They have a 90 kid
Ooh,
daycare center. It is 7:30 to 5:30.
now we're cooking. Yeah,
It's
that's
unheard of,
closer to what
but
you need.
it shouldn't be
Yeah,
unheard of, right? If we have to be expected to work 8 to 5,
yeah, yeah,
I wish more companies could pool resources to do kind of a co-op model of doing the on-site daycare or the localized daycare, because it's a very conducive. We only pay for the days we send them,
yeah,
kids that
yeah,
I'll send on Tuesday, so it's pretty remarkable.
yeah,
And my son was actually, or my husband was actually on Vermont Edition one time because he went back into the workforce because they have this. Like he
Ah,
was
oh,
recruited by this company and
yeah,
gone back if they didn't have the daycare because we wanted to, it was high pandemic. So we wanted to stay close and have
yeah.
that availability and the affordability.
Well, it's a struggle. I mean, I don't know what my kids would do without us because we fill
Yeah,
in for them.
right.
So,
Yeah, we don't have family close that can help. So it's,
yeah,
the
it's tricky.
struggle, but it's a testimony to when a community can provide that kind of service, and it shouldn't be
Yeah.
fair.
yeah.
Um, I think Adrian's coming, so let's just wait a minute or two.
Maybe I can ask a procedure question that doesn't need to be on the record or part of the official meeting. I just don't know, the question, about what this committee's been tasked with, or what's the committee? Does this, like, do subcommittees in Montpelier vote? Is that a thing you do to like vote something up to the bigger council? Does that happen? Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay,
think we'll ultimately need to take a vote to present
Got it.
whatever we come up with.
I just wasn't sure how they operated and if it was. Because are you a quorum when you're together? No, you're not a majority. How many are you? How big is?
We are three, and we are a subcommittee.
A subcommittee, right?
So
But
so
okay, so you're a
our
quorum
quorum
unto
is
yourself,
based
but you're
on
not a quorum of the council. You don't.
not of
Yeah.
the council, but
Yeah.
we can only discuss this subcommittee's business in a warned meeting.
Right, totally makes
'Cause,
sense.
yeah.
I just didn't know how that's interesting. Okay.
Well, I know she's out there because I got an email from her this morning. She's up and around. I wonder, nobody's heard from her?
and text her real quick.
It's not a bad idea. I was looking for a text from her and didn't even think to text her.
Oh, there she is.
Okay.
Ah,
Oh my God, sorry.
oh, good morning. Glad you're here.
Oh, my daughter was running late again this morning, so
Yeah,
there I
figured it
am
was
running
something
like
like that.
a lunatic around my.
All right, we're all here, so I'll call the meeting to order. And before we get to the agenda, I just want to acknowledge that I'm aware that a violation of the open meeting law has been alleged with regard to the October 8th council vote on the Whitenburg contract. I also think we've arranged or are arranging a special meeting to consider a remedy to that allegation. But under the circumstances, I think we're obliged to proceed with the subcommittee mission pending whatever action the council takes in the special meeting. But I don't know if we need a vote on that. Kelly, it seems like.
Is your question that we, so yes, and in terms of the special meeting, that is related to open meeting law and not the actual action taken by the subcommittee. So in terms of voting out the RFP, you should do that. But if there's something more specific that you have in terms of your question related to.
No, I just wanted to make sure that we it was okay for us to proceed without
Yes, it is.
without
Yes.
without a formal vote. Okay. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, we approve the agenda and move to public comment.
Yes, Steve Whitaker here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Morning, Steve.
So I'm here to put on the record that the Whitenburg contract for the Country Club Road project is void. Latin is ab initio, but it means null from the start because it was approved at an improperly warned meeting on October 8th. The agenda didn't identify a binding vote or even describe the substance of the contract, violating 1 VSA 312 subsection C. When that happens, the action is void, legally void, and any attempt to revote or ratify it would require a newly warned public process, which you've just referred to. That's not just a technicality. This contract also exposes the city to substantial financial and legal risk. It contains an exclusive brokerage clause that gives Whitenburg a potential claim to a percentage of any future sale or grand list increase, even if the firm's role ends months before a developer ever appears. I've warned you before that this could translate into hundreds of thousands of dollars in contingent claims against taxpayers. Worse, if the city manager still has not produced the required sole source justification. Under Montpelier's procurement policy, any contract above $10,000 awarded without competition demands a written justification before approval. That document was requested the morning after the vote in front of the city manager, and 5 days later, 6 days later, now still hasn't produced. Meanwhile, the rushing to sign a development-oriented contract before completing the brownfield supplemental site investigation, the corrective action plan, and a traffic capacity study. We're moving out of sequence and undermining our eligibility for the CDBG-DR and Better Connections planning funds. That's real serious. That in effect, these grants are designed for community-driven planning, not speculative brokerage. The Department of Housing and Community Affairs Department's own general counsel has confirmed in writing that no developer needs to be on board for the city to qualify for those funds. Yet this contract presumes one must be, creating a false urgency that drove the October 8th vote. If we continue down this path, Montpelier risks losing access to the CDBG-DR planning dollars that could support resilient, walkable new Uptown Village, disqualifying itself from future implementation funds because of conflicts of interest or exclusive representation clauses, paying White and Burke not only for hourly consulting, but potentially for a contingent commission on any future property transaction. This is not transparency. It's an inside deal that should never have been voted on under a hidden agenda title. The most responsible action now is to acknowledge that the October 8th vote was void or was improper and that thus voided the contract. Cease any work or payment under the contract. You can continue to pay Stephanie hourly. Reprioritize the environmental, traffic, and infrastructure due diligence work that must precede any developer selection. That course protects the council, preserves grant eligibility, and restores public trust. Finally, I want this entered into the record because I believe every councilor, every subcommittee member, every resident deserves to know that we can still correct course. It's not too late to pivot from brokerage to planning, to put Montpelier back on track towards a truly resilient village rather than a consultant-driven subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Agenda item 4, RFP development. Unless there is additional comment. Stephanie?
Okay.
Take
I'm
take
going to share my screen. I'm going to go over kind of what I thought we should review and how we should structure our time, since this is our last scheduled meeting at the moment. So to start, we'll go through the RFQ, talk about any remaining questions, wordsmithing, etc. And then I think I just answered my question. That's up to you about taking a vote, but that would be the time to do it, because then I think we should go on to talking a little bit more about the distribution. And I'd like to ask your opinions about a few things and also ask you to do a few things. And then I want to talk about process relative to the RFP. We talked about that briefly yesterday, what we're going to be asking of developers and development partners to come to us with and how we discuss it. And then I'm going to suggest our next meetings and the meeting schedules. So does that sound okay to you, Sal?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
All right, let's launch into the RFQ. I sent the final draft red line to you yesterday. Apologies for like 1,000 copies, but we were just working on in the flow and lots of different things. So I got red lines from some of you and sent the other red lines. So we have some new language in here relative to what we talked about yesterday. I have a few areas of questions. So I'm going to start with my questions. And then if you have further questions and comments, feel free to jump in. But my first question is about the acreage. So how do you want to, we can either call it 20 or 35, and there's a question between the two, and there's no right answer. It's really a matter of how you want to frame it. So in the concept plan, actually, let me pull up. Well, no, you know the concept plan has let's call it the blobs. Okay, for lack of a better word, we have the blobs, buildable areas, right? Those buildable areas, if you count what's inside the lines of each buildable area, that is 20.3 acres. However, if you look at the area kind of contiguous between all of those, including the road, it's 35. So 35 is probably more accurate because it could allow for the flexibility of continuity between the different parcels. But if you're talking about the actual lands that were, the bubbles is a better term for it. The bubbles were identified not with, I don't think, like careful scalpel precision. So I would say 35 more accurately describes
Could we,
the area.
Stephanie, could we use a range?
Yeah, we definitely could.
Wouldn't that solve the problem then? Then we, we have a minimum and a maximum and to be
Yeah.
determined. Yeah.
Approximately 20 to 35 acres.
Does
You just
that work
call
for
it that?
everybody?
Yeah, that's probably fine. We may get a question of, is it 20 or is it 35? But we can explain it in that response that it's,
Yeah. And we can refine it at later
You know what?
stages.
What we could do too is I can add a footnote and I can explain it in the footnote relative to the concept master plan.
I think it's also mentioned in the background section,
It is,
35
it
acres.
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll make myself a note. I'll tighten this up, but, okay. Yeah, that works. Matt, do you feel good about that? Like giving it as a range and then putting a footnote? Okay, good. Thank you to Matt for helping me with all of that because we had to kind of figure out what the acreage was and make sure it was, said what it needed to say.
Can I just jump in real quick with a question? Apologies, I hadn't been to the other meetings and it wasn't clear to me in the RFP. As I read the RFP, it kind of sounds like, if I were just from the outside, that I'm purchasing the 135 acres for $1.
It doesn't come through from like especially with the reworking.
Well, we're talking about project highlights and it says there's 20 to 35 acres of buildable area on 133 acres, but it
Okay.
doesn't actually say we're only selling you the
Yeah.
buildable area. In fact, it then goes on to say there's a 15,000 square foot building. We're not actually selling that for $1. We're
Right.
keeping that. And it
To
really
remain.
wasn't clear. We're keeping the recreation area. We're keeping all the conservation lands. What we're selling for $1, and the question is really, are we, and it sounds like we are, putting the whole buildable area on the table for the potential
Yep.
purchase. So I just would want to see it a little bit clearer, a little bit tighter to go through and say
Sure.
the buildable area
Yep.
exclusive of the recreation zone is what we're putting on the table. And maybe we should attach a site plan that has some crosshatch area or something like that on a map.
Well, and I mean, I think we keep going back to the concept plan. I think that's the right plan to refer to.
Okay.
And, only the buildable areas are.
Only the buildable
in.
areas in the concept plan.
Just
Yes.
continue to hammer that home. So, okay. If that
Thank
wasn't
you.
clear, thank you for that perspective, because we tried to sharpen the pencil a little on it, but let me add that here, and I can add it up above and add it below. We'll make it very
Yeah,
clear.
it just never actually got to
Yeah.
saying the words of, the buildable area is what we're giving you, not everything else. We're keeping
Yeah.
everything else.
Well,
I would-
it's important to clarify. I think it's a good comment. I mean,
Yeah, it is.
we all discussed it and we're pretty clear on it internally, but it needs to be clear to the people.
Oh,
who
we're
are
in
reading
it.
this.
Yeah, we're in the
Yeah.
weeds on it. So,
Steph-
yeah.
Stephanie, I'm gonna suggest that drawing a line around the blobs
Uh-huh.
and then putting a note 35 acres, and then they can do the math for the smaller blobs on the
That could work.
master
Yeah.
plan. I
Yeah.
can do that.
Can you do that? Okay.
I can do that. I think Mike's point is a good one, and
Uh-huh. Yeah, go ahead and do that, and we'll find a way to weave it
because then the I don't know,
Mhm.
as a designer, then it becomes clear where the
Mhm.
limits of the 35 acres are.
Heard. Yep.
Yeah,
that okay,
sounds like a
Sal?
good- yeah, that sounds like a very good idea. Yeah.
Okay. I like that. So, all right, then let's skip down here to the CDBG DR requirements and the percentage. Oh, Adrian.
So I have a question about the CDBG requirements. So up on top, it says city, under project highlights. It says city contribution up to $11 million for needed infrastructure pending CDBG DR and catalyst funding. So,
Mhm.
right, I'm a risk person. So what happens if we don't get that? and then we put it in here, like, is there like, does that, like, what does that mean? And like, what if we don't get that? I don't want to be held accountable for $11 million if we don't.
No, and I mean, none of this is binding.
Okay.
It, you know, we say it in a couple places, it's not binding,
Okay.
but we could also say contingent.
I would say, like, we say pending, which is fine. I just want
contingent
to make
on-
sure whatever legality there is, if we don't.
Yeah, none of this
Um,
is binding, and they know, like, any savvy developer will know that, like, unless you have the money in the hand, you can't promise that, and we're not in a development agreement at all, you know, so this, I think, is just
Okay.
you know, what the city is willing to pursue on behalf of this project. And so, and we describe that later, that we're going out for it.
Okay.
I think the important piece here is that, you know, they understand that there's a significant infrastructure cost to developing this site, and that would have been on them had the city not acquired this and decided to invest in the infrastructure, and that we, you know, are pursuing as much as we can, 11 million. This, I mean, they know this, and maybe there's a place I can add this, but the capital stack for the infrastructure needs is going to, it may look very different in 6 months. 6 months, they may, you know, they may come back to us in the next month with an idea or, you know, their qualifications. And then in 2 months, they come back with a proposal and it requires this much infrastructure, and we run the numbers, and it's actually going to be a better deal for us if we use chip, or it may be a better deal for us if we, you know, and chip plus catalyst versus the CDBG DR, which has a affordability requirement, you know, like, we have to weigh out all the different reasons and contributions to the capital stack and what's the right fit for this community. So,
Are
you know,
people
we
more,
say here down, like, city assistance in pursuing funding opportunities. We could also add a note here. City is open to other funding sources, continuing to pursue funding sources, you know, final infrastructure funding to be determined. I mean, this is just the highlights. We could maybe make it
Right.
more clear in the.
are people more comfortable with contingent upon versus pending? I mean, that seems.
I think so, because pending seems like it's moving
Almost
through a
more, yeah.
process
Yeah.
and that it's
Okay.
just waiting for a signature. I
Mhm.
feel like contingent is a little bit stronger in that we don't know the outcome. That was just made me feel that's a little bit more comfortable. And then when you scroll down, I think you were getting there, Stephanie, and the requirements. I know yesterday, it feels like years ago,
Yep,
we
it
were
does.
talking about the percentages for the low, moderate income. And I think we were going to get clarification on that because
Yeah.
there was debate between this site and like the whole funding requirements. And I think that's like
Yeah.
a huge difference. So I want to make sure we have that information correct because that's like huge.
The
It
word
is.
pending, by the way, appears again in the partnership opportunity.
You know, I actually, can I just put in a plug for the idea of pending as opposed to contingent? Because I feel like, and Adrian, I don't want to interrupt the flow on your question right there about CBGDR affordability, but to me, it's just about, like, the city is pursuing all of these potential tools to incentivize development here, to make development possible, right? And so it's not like that we're guaranteeing that we're going to be able to do anything, right? It's just that there are tools on the table that we're kind of pursuing. And so I wouldn't want to say that, like, we can only move forward on this contingent on getting CBDG DR. That's like one tool in the toolbox that we may or may not have access to. I think what we want to signal in the RFQ process is just, we're pursuing any kind of tools at our disposal, and, like, we'll, you know, as we enter into a partnership, we'll continue to try and make those come to fruition. Do you know what I mean? So I really actually do feel like pending is a better stance than
What if
Ben,
what if sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but just what if we could, if we stay contingent upon a contingent on the applied for, you know, something where we include in the same, that's too wordy, but in the same sentence, talk about, basically that we're applying for these,
Yeah.
these have already been, I mean, one of them's already been applied for, right? Catalyst, Matt, has been applied for. And, you know, the CDBG-DR, we have full intent on applying for. So I think you're right. The forward momentum without being binding is a balance.
I leave the wordsmithing to other folks. I just
Okay.
want to, like, give that, I just want to, like, that clarity around the idea of, like, we're not saying this project isn't moving forward under any circumstances if we don't get that NBRC grant, right? We're saying like we're pursuing this NBRC grant as a way to kind of incentivize development, and it's one of many tools that we'll be trying to secure to make this happen, right? But it isn't necessarily contingent as if that's the only path forward.
So
But
do
I
we
also-
have to name
quick-
do we have to
quick-
name any of the grants then? If you want to keep it pending, and we are pursuing grants, do we have to call them out specifically then? Can we leave it more vague, or
No,
is
you
that
should definitely call them out specifically because it
Okay.
does give credibility that
okay?
you know what you're talking about. That versus because these are known sources. But I can wordsmith it. Procedural question. When you take your vote today, I assumed I would have time to correct these red lines, adopt the red lines, and finalize the version that gets sent to council tomorrow in your packets. When you vote, are you able to vote on supporting me to finish the adopt the red lines and then send that to the full council because it's going to a full vote next week? Like, I don't think I can hit accept all changes at the end of this meeting is all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, the other thing to do is to schedule another meeting before the council meeting for us to actually
Take the
review,
vote.
take the vote.
Up to you. I just,
Yeah.
Next week I'm full on out. I'm in Atlanta from Sunday to Thursday, like 15-hour days. Unless we met at like 6 o'clock.
Well, if I might, so if you were to accept, if you were to accept the red lines, as proposed, then we could get that back to you, even before it goes into the packet. But if you could sort of vote on that version, if there are substantive changes, it's like something's still under review and there's a component that you want to still discuss,
Then we
then
can
by all
do
means,
something.
we can schedule a meeting. But if there's nothing to talk about, it's just more to review the
Mhm.
changes as they take hold, then we can certainly, you could vote on that. We could get you a copy of it. So if for some reason there's something in there that you're like, wait a minute, like we could
Yeah,
always
yeah.
reconvene.
well, and right, doesn't the full council, you have another chance to
Yeah,
vote on this next week if the wording changed in a way that didn't sit
yeah,
right. So,
totally.
okay. Okay.
Can I?
So I will work on that wording. Sorry, Ben.
No, I'm sorry. Adrian had asked a question that that it's an important one
Yep,
around.
no, don't worry. We're not leaving this topic because this is the one I wanted to talk about the most, which was this percentage. And we have Mike on the line too today to talk about this. So, what I am not clear about is how do we give, what I'm clear about, and let me see if I get this right from Mike can correct me and Matt. If we don't believe that the 70% percentage would have to apply entirely to this whole property. It wouldn't bind the property from forevermore. It would apply to what we're building with the infrastructure in this first phase, because we would build the infrastructure and have a resulting project afterwards. And that resulting project, we don't know. Is it 30 units? Is it 100 units? We don't know, because we don't have a design plan yet. And so, but there would be likely to be a 70% requirement for LMI within that first phase. Is that accurate, or is it more, you said the portfolio, so I'm still unclear.
Yeah, that's close. So this very specific question was asked to the VCDP team at the state, which is the Vermont Community Development Program, who runs CDBG-DR. And Ann Kroll was on there with her team, and she runs the program. And so when we were talking about, because we had the meeting and we had put in a pre-application, and this was the pre-application debrief when they said we weren't going to be invited to apply for DR for this project because we did not have a developer on board. That was that at that time, but they encouraged us to keep going. And we asked this question as well, just to make sure it was clear on the table, because it wouldn't make sense for us to bind, or at least I would have the answer to bring to council. My recommendation would be, wouldn't think we would want to bind ourselves to 70% of all new housing going forward. So I was like, is it a percentage of housing units, a number of housing units? How does this work? I was like, because if we build 300 housing units and 70% of them have to be LMI, we don't have enough money to get TIF to make the project work. And she was like, oh God, no, it would not be 70% of the entire project. It's going to be based on the amount of funding that is going in. So if you're looking at, and we don't know how much money we would get from CDBG-DR, but let's put in a number of $8 million. If we got $8 million of DR funds, then if that were just to build housing, you would probably have enough money to build about 16 to 20 housing units, because it costs $300,000 to $500,000 per unit to build. That's just what it costs to build a unit. So if we just took the 500,000 because it makes for easier math, and even with easy math, I still screwed up when I gave you guys the numbers last time. So $8 million. So that multiply that times 2, you end up with 16 housing units. So for $8 million, we could build 16 housing units. 70% of those must be LMI, or 11 units. Now, if they come back and give us less money, or they come back and say, well, actually the number that we're using for doing this is $425,000, whatever, you can see how you can just do the math and calculate it. But we're kind of talking about a number between 11 units and, let's say, maybe 20 units. We're kind of in that range. Is probably, if we were awarded $8 million, that's probably about where we would be talking about, some number in there. And that would be the number. We have to build at least this many LMI units that would be affordable for 20 years, tracked by the state of Vermont. And these are all things we would have to work out with the developer. Downstreet has said they're willing to do the tracking of that. But
Okay.
that's how the formula works. It's not 70% of everything going forward. That very, very, very specific question was asked of the people who are the experts on this, and that's
Right.
the response I got. Is it's 70%, but they're not giving us money to build housing. They're giving us money
No.
to build infrastructure to build housing. So it's kind of a little mathy.
So
in
what I would recommend for the purposes of today, for the purposes of getting this out next week, I suggest leaving the language in the way I have it structured here, which is that per the requirements, a percentage must be low and moderate income and must be occupied by 2030. And then let them do their own research too, because this is up to them. This is a developer requirement. For them to do more further research, we'll do further research so we understand the guardrails. We'll have those conversations. We have another conversation forthcoming with ACCD. If there are further questions about this, there's a Q&A period with the development community built into this, so they can ask that qualifying question. If they don't ask the question, we could put it out as a Q&A at that time to clarify if we want to. But for now, I think we need to kind of keep it high level. Matt?
And I did write to Ann Kroll yesterday. I haven't received a response yet. I'll put in the chat box the 2 questions. Like, I won't send you the whole email I send her, but these are the questions that I asked specifically to try to get clarity on this for you.
Thank you. And I think, I added more down here, which is how this is stipulated, so they can, and then again, they can do their own research. That's their job, as they're developing this and coming up with it. And again, if they have more questions, they can ask, and the planning department and we will all respond to that. How do people feel about that? Positive?
Yeah.
Okay.
It seems under the circumstances, it's the best we can do. I mean, Mike, the conversation you had was in September or October. I mean, it was a while ago, was it not? Or July, maybe even.
No, I think pre-apps went in August, so I want to say it would have been the last week of August, just before the Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, I mean,
because
more recent discussions that I'm aware of have, contradicted that or suggested that it may be otherwise. And I, without getting a response from someone like Ann Kroll to Matt's questions, I think Stephanie's suggestion is probably the only.
Well, and I have another further amendment to my own suggestion. And that is to ask, do you, at the council, would you be able to, accept new wording into the RFQ, because what I was wondering is between now and Wednesday, if we got like a better way to explain this to a developer and frame it, because they may have a way to do that, could we add it on Wednesday in the meeting? It's an open discussion at that time.
I believe we could.
Okay, so why don't, I mean, we'll do what we can. Again, I think long-term, you're safe with this approach during an RFQ because it's still, you know, high level. People are just submitting quals and expression of interest. They can do their research and look into it. And then we can also embed it more into the RFP. But if we can even come up with a little more brackets for it on Wednesday, we could do that.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me that there's really kind of like, I really like the approach of just being like, if we get CBDG-DR funding, the developer's going to have to follow all the requirements, right? And that they can do their research to figure that out. Really, it becomes more a question for council. Is that something that we're comfortable with and we want to pursue, right? And so to me, that's kind of the information that is really important to get from Anne and from the team at Community Development Program. It's just that real specificity. And Mike, I really appreciate like the idea of like teasing out that distinction between percentage of units based on unit cost versus here's 100 units that we're building up at Country Club Road and 70% of them have to meet that requirement, right? So like really just kind of frankly getting in writing from Anne or from somebody at the team, like that nuance I think is really important to inform council just as much as it is to inform the developer.
Would be great to have something in writing. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I sent that email shortly after our meeting yesterday morning and I haven't heard from her, but I can call the office and see if I can get a response if you think that's appropriate.
Yeah.
Anne's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah,
Seems like
she's
a
great.
good idea.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll call her this morning and see what I can find out. And
Great.
try again. I understand my whole point was to get it in writing. Mike's the expert. We trust Mike because he's the expert, but it would be good to get it in writing just to
Yes.
make everybody's
Sure.
nerves calm.
Great.
I just have one more, and I do want to spend a good, like the remainder of this meeting talking about the public process component of the RFP and our next meetings. So I'm hoping we're close to being able to be comfortable with this RFQ. But the last question I had, we have these supporting documents. It's kind of, you know, a basic list. You've got the phase 1 environmental, the umbrella approval letter, the actionable plan, the phase 2, and the concept plan from May. I may actually also include both the memo. There was two other pieces on the website about the concept plan that I might want to add from May. They're on the website, but what I wanted to talk about was this survey, because there's a land survey from 1991. And I didn't know if we wanted to include that. And Kelly, do you remember, or Mike, when in 22-23, didn't we do a new survey based on, you know, to do the land mapping that was done?
I don't know if it's a recorded land survey. It would be a question for VHB as to whether or not they actually went out and found all the
Okay.
pins
They
again.
might have just done the topo. Yeah. Okay. Matt.
Yeah.
I went with Nick in our office, who's, you know, our maps expert,
Yeah.
and went through the city files. This
Yeah.
is the only complete topo. There are fragments of other portions of the site, but
Okay.
this is the only one that shows the border, the outline.
The outline. Okay. Okay, that's fine. And again, they can do their own research if they need more information in this phase. So, or they can ask for it. Okay.
And the city has a database. Sorry.
Yeah. That's okay. You're muted though.
So
The city has a database, and it has a pretty complete list of every single thing that's on file in terms of maps.
Oh,
and we went through that very thoroughly.
Great.
And so this would be the most comprehensive one that's on file.
Okay.
So Stephanie, the memo you were talking about is the memo that accompanied the blob drawing? Yeah.
The buildable areas. The buildable
The
areas.
buildable area.
Okay.
Sorry. There was a time when we actually talked about the blobs back
Yeah.
in the 22 area. So
Nobody wants a blob. People want
Nobody
buildable.
wants a blob. Got it. Duly noted. Okay. With that, I would ask for to move on to the next component. So I don't know what you want to do with this, Sal, if you want to take it from here with the RFQ or make that part of the last part of the meeting.
No, I think if we're happy with the discussion of the text of the RFQ, we ought to vote on that.
So would that be a motion like, I move that we recommend the RFQ with suggestions or redlined amendments? Sorry, I want to make sure we get this precise.
Yeah.
I move that we recommend the RFQ with the suggested red line corrections or amendments to the full council for their consideration and approval.
Kelly, did you get that? Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passed unanimously.
Thank you. Okay. So, okay, so what I want to talk about is process. We talked yesterday, what are we going to do when we get, okay, let me start with the process from here on out. Let me remind you of the timeline. So on October 22nd, the council will meet, provided that they approve the RFQ, it will be sent out on the 23rd. On November 6th, there'll be a site visit with anyone who has questions from the development community. They will submit questions to the city and we will distribute them after that. Questions are due on November 10th. On November 18th is when their qualifications are due. So then it's a couple of week period before we provide a short list of developers to the city council for the city council to approve, and also the RFP text for the city to approve. That's all in early December. December 10th is the meeting I've identified as the meeting for that, so that the RFP could be sent out on the 11th, and proposals from the RFP, so the actual proposals from the selected 5 firms max, are due at the end of January. Once the January proposals are received, then there's a period of about a month for the city to review them, interview developers, have deliberations, and on March 11th, vote on the selected developer to then proceed to an LOI. So you take first step is LOI, then you can go into a more deliberative session to do a deliberative time period to do your development agreement. The reason I explain all that again is because you asked the question, how involved is the subcommittee in those stages, and what's the involvement look like?
Right, where does it start and stop? Yeah.
Right. And what I wanted to explain is that in a lot of other communities, actually every other community, all of this is done by staff and brought back to city council or select board as a whole with the recommendation, and they can vote at that time.
Mhm.
There's no full board, full council exploration of the individual proposals or the comparison between them. That's just not done. That's not how it's done. I recognize that that's not Montpelier, so I'm not suggesting that. I just pointed out because there's a big component of this, which is developers are going to be hesitant in public forums to share specifics of their design and financials. So even in the RFQ stage, if they have a good idea and they're supposed to submit some of their good ideas, they're not going to want to necessarily disclose that in a public to the whole public. Their competitors are also watching. If they've come up with a really cool partner, or any kind of partner that they want to build this with, they've done the work of going out and finding that partner. They, don't want to share that. And then the next person you pick, if they don't get chosen, you take that idea and bring it back to them and say, well, why don't you take that partner? So I say this because this is the reality of the tension we're in between wanting to really fully vet the groups in a public forum, and also the necessity of the reality of the chilling effect that can have. And especially when it comes to the proposals. So the calls time, this first round, not as much, but the second round, they're putting thousands, possibly tens of thousands into their proposal. We hope they are. We want them to put in really good hard work and time and energy into coming up with something that we really want to see. And they're not going to be willing necessarily to open up their books and open up their technique and their proprietary approach to this in front of all their competitors. So I guess I flip it back to the committee to talk about, because I'm not sure how you structure it in a way that feels good to everybody and yet empowers the city, puts the city in the most empowered position, you know, in the best negotiating position, in the best position to review.
So the proposals by the developers are considered confidential when they're submitted?
They could be. We could, you know, we don't have to say that.
Well, I mean, otherwise they're public documents, are they not?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But in some communities, that's not a big issue because there isn't
Nobody's
a
watching,
public process established. They know it's just going to happen at staff level. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a valid concern. I mean, I completely understand why developers might not want to expose their proprietary information in a public forum. What do people think? I mean, I'm not sure the subcommittee is a particularly efficient process actually for that, depending on how many responses we get. And I assume that any work that staff did on proposals that were received would, and recommendations they made based on that would give the council sufficient time to review. I mean, what would the process be? It'd be put into the packet on Friday and we vote on the following Wednesday? Or would we have a longer period of time to look at it?
Is that a question for me, Sal?
I guess it is, yeah.
So I think it depends on the way that you want to take this up. And then sort of the timelines that we're working with and when we bring it back to you. And so there are a couple of different variables there. I do think that based on the information that would be provided, it would likely be proprietary, and you probably would want to consider those RFPs in executive session, say. And so, you know, depending on whether or not you want to make the recommendation that the full council review, or maybe the subcommittee reviews these documents, they could still be reviewed confidentially. Or you could have staff do that. So there's a whole suite of options that I'm happy to work up for you in terms of, you know, how you can approach this. But we can make sure that you do have the timing. You know, I think with these RFPs or RFQs, you know, having council members review it, if that's your preference. I mean, certainly staff can do that and provide a recommendation and then provide you the background detail on a confidential basis, or, you know, you could certainly review them. So I think it depends on how you'd like to go. If the recommendation is that maybe even the subcommittee reviews these RFPs because you want to see them all and evaluate them.
Well, thinking about it a little more as you're speaking, I'm not sure it's a subcommittee decision. It seems to me like it's a council decision, maybe to decide how we proceed as a group.
And I think that would be a good decision point for the conversation on Wednesday.
On Wednesday, when we make our recommendation.
Determine, you know, who is going to review the RFPs or RFQs when they come in. I think it'll probably likely, and I'll talk to legal counsel about this, but it probably will likely be the recommendation from staff and through sort of legal counsel that any of the RFPs or RFQs would be confidential until selected.
Mm-hmm.
I'll jump in. That feels
yeah,
so yucky to me. I don't like that. So, I mean, I have a totally different perspective. I'm not, you know, I do truly believe in community engagement and the public process. And, you know, is there some way to put a copyright disclaimer on there or something to protect the developers. I mean, how can they not share that with the public before it's voted on? Like I just can't process that in my head. Like it just seems so foreign and so awkward that, you know, I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't feel right, but that if that's the way it's done in like the real world, then I guess that's the process. But I feel very uncomfortable with that. I would love for our community to have input on their neighborhood that we're paying tax dollars for, especially when we have no idea what the designs are going to be or what it's going to look like or how it's going to feel. And I would love for the developers and the designers to share their thoughts and their, you know, how they came up with it. And I mean, that's the picture in my mind. I mean, maybe it's a utopian world that I'm living in, but I feel like that feels like a nice process to me, but Stephanie, you're saying that literally never happens. So,
It doesn't, and it's also, I mean, I'm with you, Adrian. I mean, that's why I brought it as a question,
yeah.
because if it was just a decided, I know this community and I know how passionate everybody is about it. And so I understand the desire. And it's not like the city wouldn't have, the city has empowered its counselors to make decisions, knowing the city, the community's feelings on this too. So I do want to, you know, empower you as counselors to know that you would have the review process within your power and to look through and do your due diligence and vetting, knowing but there's only so much steering, you know, there's been all this work done to steer into what the vision might be. And so then it's time for the market to speak to it. I guess what I'm saying to Adrian is like, no, it's not done. Could you do it? Sure. We do probably need to add this piece. I think coming out of the meeting Wednesday, one thing I would ask is maybe putting it right in this RFQ, or because we say, you know, we give a little heads up, this is what we're going to need from you for the RFP. We should probably, if there's going to be any kind of public process, put that disclaimer right in that part, in that section, because they deserve to know what's been, you know, what's going to be expected of them in the next phase. And then certainly in the actual RFP process, you have to list how this is going to get decided so that they know. And again, that could just have a chilling effect. And so my fear is that you're going to lose, you know, people that are interested in doing this. Now, it's your prerogative, because, you know, if the council wants to say, no, we want this in an open format.
Well,
Yep.
Michael, let me just, there's a difference between exposing the information from all the responses we get versus making public the information from those we have selected to choose among. I can understand why we wouldn't want to expose all of the responses, because some of those people won't be selected. They don't want to give their ideas away. In the meantime, everybody is, they can't alter their proposal after they submitted it, I assume, right?
Correct.
We're evaluating whatever they submit in their initial response. It may change later, but our selection will be based on what they propose. I think there's a distinction between the ones we select and the larger group. So the ones we select are going to be exposed eventually in the public meeting. The question is, does that give the public enough time, or the council, in fact, enough time? And I wonder if there's a remedy for that. We can think about that.
I'll defer Mike.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say something very similar, just to the fact that we're talking about a couple of different phases too. We're talking about, you know, the letter of interest and being able to evaluate who are we going to invite to go forward, and recognizing that, yes, there's still going to be a process that Adrian is talking about for the bigger build out. But in the first step, we've got to see, you know, as Stephanie or David, I think, said, was, you know, they put out RFPs before and had one response, or two responses, or three responses, and said, we got three responses, but two of them internally we can look at as staff and make a determination that they're really not viable, or we would recommend to council that let's focus on just this one or just these two, and then they're going to have to build these out, and those are going to have a certain amount public process as they're doing their final proposals. It's not like this is all going to be behind doors and then we come out with an agreement and say, here's who we picked and here's what it's going to look like. There's going to be a process, but I think in the first steps, it's these ones where they've got a lot of questions and they have ideas and they want to kind of keep their good ideas close to their best.
I agree, and I think there could be an option here, and just for the interest of time, would it be helpful if I brought back on Wednesday? I'm not gonna be able to get it in the packet by tomorrow. There's just no way, but yeah, no. Like a few options of how you could decide which parts are public and which aren't, for each phase, start of the phase, and let the council decide on that. I mean, you could go from like the most open, the most involved, to the least, and then a couple options in between, and let everyone vote on that. And to know the implications. I mean, there's got to be an education here, about what I just told you, or, Carrie's on, but not, the rest of the counselors. So that could be part of it. The other thing I wanted to mention is what that menu might look like is disclosing in the qualifications section, the teams. You can identify who proposed. You can identify the names of these folks and the teams that have been assembled. You can identify certain pieces of information that could be public versus the rest that, okay, we're not going to share their financials publicly, but we are going to share what their general layout is going to look like, or some variation of that. Yeah, Matt.
Well, I'm sorry, Matt, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just gonna say all of the teams that are going to submit RFQ responses are going to have portfolios online. They're going to have a website presence, and just listing the names and the company's website would help the public know what the packages are going to look like. I'd also say, and just to kind of reinforce what Mike said, there's in my experience, in doing other development work, there's a certain point at which the staff needs to be trusted to be able to discern, like separate wheat from chaff. I mean, somebody might put a really beautiful picture in front of us, but if they don't have the type of experience that we as staff experts on this subject matter know, then we can automatically kind of say, well, yeah, it's a pretty picture, but it's not viable. It's not a reasonable proposal. And so I would encourage you to kind of work with us, the staff, to figure out what is a reasonable team to be working with versus what looks like a reasonable team. There's a big difference.
Yeah, no, it's a great distinction.
To that end, yeah, thank you, Matt, because that kind of dovetails with what I was going to propose for our next 2 subcommittee meetings, because you asked me to come back with that. And then we could, again, I kind of have this pinned as what do the subcommittee meetings look like after the proposals are due, January 30th. But what I was going to suggest is between, to start, so I do have some, I have one more idea, which very limited time, but that I want to talk about between now and November 12th, I'm sorry. But November 12th is my next proposed subcommittee meeting. And the reason is because between now and then, the RFQ will go out, the site visit will happen, the questions we submitted by the development community. November 12th, we will have the questions, staff and myself will assemble them, and maybe already start putting some meat on the bones about responses. But I thought that could be a time when the subcommittee comes together to review their questions and talk about it, brainstorm responses, see what, let's just check in. What are people asking? What have we heard? And do a check-in on November 12th. There may be some homework from that. Then I suggest after the quals are submitted on the 18th, we meet on the 21st. Now that's like the Monday before Thanksgiving. It's tough. We're running up against holidays, and I know that can be a tough week. But the quals are due on that Friday. And so could we meet real quick in the beginning of that week and review the qualifications? And at this point is where Matt and Mike pointed out, we could be doing, the staff could already, and the team can kind of provide you with a summary by then and say, okay, well, we've eliminated these for this reason. you know, we're happy to talk about it more if you'd like, but let's focus over here. Help guide that discussion, but guide the discussion on the 21st to review that. Consider if a matrix is even needed for this phase of the qualifications. But I am saying that the qualifications is a subcommittee task. And so then the city, I don't know if there needs to be, this is where I've got this point in here about potentially needing executive session. So that could be what's discussed in terms of this public or not public. And then, you know, maybe there's follow-up questions you might have. And then in the meantime, we'll draft the RFP. Now, the reason I'm suggesting doing the RFP here and not sooner is because, first of all, it's largely following the RFQ. Like the RFQ's done a lot of the legwork there. So the next part will develop, but I think it's best if we wait until we've had the section about this, you know, we've had some responses and some questions so that we know what we're responding to. And then I'm suggesting that on December 3rd, I'm suggesting that on December 3rd, we talk about the qualifications again, and then you can vote to send the shortlist to the council for its approval. So I am suggesting the subcommittee be involved. And I think if that's the case, then also on Wednesday, then the full council needs to expand, because you talked about yesterday that like the charge to the subcommittee was just to develop the RFP. And that will be part of this section here, but it's also to help whittle down the list of qualifications to the folks who are going to get invited to submit a proposal. And so if you need that charge expanded, I would ask explicitly that you know, get expanded to reviewing proposals and bringing back as appropriate to the full council.
Okay, so that obviously two things we need to decide, but Matt, go ahead with.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we don't have to, the staff doesn't have to eliminate anything, but maybe we could give you a ranked order. Mike, does that seem right? Like what we think is the best, and then ones that we think are the weakest.
Yeah, we're not the decision makers. We always just make recommendations. So yeah, it's always the council. In the end, it's always the council's decision. We would always be just making recommendations.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a couple things to decide here. The easiest one maybe is the suggested dates for meetings. I've checked my calendar. I'm open for future meetings. That would then, however, depend on the council decision on Wednesday to expand the charge of the subcommittee. And then finally, whether we're going to include, Stephanie, the options that you suggested regarding the confidentiality or the kind of information that we would release to the public.
Do we need Adrienne, by the way? She's about to
have to go. I have like a super important meeting at 9. So if we need any decisions in the next 30 seconds.
If
I
I,
don't think there's
if
a
I
vote.
could,
Sounds like council decisions.
yeah, if the staff could just get the rest of this together and get it into the packet, then that way you don't miss anything, Adrienne.
All right, sorry y'all, but I gotta go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Sorry, I'm on the road and technology challenges. But what I did hear, Stephanie, just in terms of like providing the range of options for, you know, kind of public visibility on all of this kind of stuff, I really do feel like any examples you have from the field of other communities of how they're handling this kind of thing, I think provide a really good baseline for us, right? So like, here's the continuum of options and here's what we've seen in this community versus this community. I think just to help us inform like what's kind of best practice.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I think we agree that these are decisions to be made by the council at large. We can make our case for modifying the charge of the subcommittee at Wednesday's meeting.
And
as
what
well.
do I need to provide? I won't be able to get you the full range of options by tomorrow. But would what needs to be in the packet to prepare and what needs to be on the agenda to prepare the council for that discussion?
So I think if we include the final version of the RFP,
Yeah.
And then, you know, we sort of walk through the options of what we're going to be doing in the meeting. So, you know, the high level is just expanding the charge, talking about sort of the confidentiality in future meetings. And we can keep it pretty basic. And then early next week, we can get together the details. And if we have it in advance of Wednesday's meeting, then we can post it. Or we can present in the meeting.
Yeah, so the agenda would really just need to note that we'll be considering those, you know, several options surrounding the RFP.
Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like Kelly has that and she'll be able to package that up with the RFQ and then, yeah, I don't know if you actually need like a memo from me on that. I doubt it. I don't know, but I can also include.
I'll follow up. But
Okay.
I think we should be good just to
Okay.
get sort of a blanket cover letter together along with just sort of the action taken today. And then we'll take it from there.
Okay, and I assume that if Matt hears from Ann Crowell, we'll find out.
Yeah, I will call her this morning. I have a meeting at 9:15, but I'll
Sure.
call her when I
Yeah.
get back to the office, and then I will also edit the bubble map to reflect the two different available
Okay.
buildable areas
Thank you.
Okay.
this morning,
Yeah, no,
and get
great.
that to Stephanie so she can include it in the package.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Is there anything else we need to do before we go? Okay, if not, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.